We got a brand new monster manual earlier this year, and overall, I like it a lot. Plenty of monsters were given much needed upgrades or more unique traits, and they added a bunch of variants to make different enemies usable throughout a campaign. That's all really cool. But there are a few very weird choices in here too, some new and some carried over from old editions. Would I be a real D&D player if I didn't want to nitpick those things and make a video about it? I don't think so. It's all in good fun, but here's some of the things in this book that to me just don't make a lot of sense. When you're trying to design a variety of creatures with varying levels of strengths, it's understandable that stats can be kinda wonky sometimes. If an enemy has a higher challenge rating, they need better stats to compensate. But that means when you look at the lore of each creature, things can get a little weird. For example, one of the smartest beings in the entire multiverse is a bandit crime lord with an intelligence of 18. Look, I'm not saying it doesn't take smarts to run an underworld empire, but compare that to mages who spend their entire lives studying the secrets of magic and only have a 17 in the stat. Or how about another creature that's sitting at 18 intelligence? That would be the Aboleth, unknowable, immortal aliens from the beginning of time. Sure, they've orchestrated the fall of civilizations and have had eons to collect untold knowledge. But they know how to cook meth. That's a genius right there. I really find it fascinating how inconsistent the ability to swallow things whole is in D&D. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Yes, a Tarrasque being able to gobble down a house is perfectly in line with how I picture that monster. But sometimes you have to scratch your head at which enemies they let consume their prey and which can only grapple at best. Like dragons. A gargantuan red dragon who lords over its domain, eating anyone who gets in their path, can't actually swallow a creature. They don't even have an official bite attack anymore. But the Behir can, which is, sort of a smaller flightless dragon. Or how about rocks, giant birds that swoop down out of the sky to snatch up unsuspecting victims? Nope, they can't swallow anything. But a giant frog? Yeah, they can slurp you up. I get that not every big monster in the manual can get the swallow ability. That would be kind of ridiculous, but it doesn't make it any less weird where they've decided to draw their lines. Poison is one of the less useful damage types for your players to have because so many creatures either resist it or are outright immune. So when a monster that you'd think would obviously be able to shrug it off actually has no defenses against poison, it can be a little shocking. One such example is the vampire. Most undead can't be affected by poison because, it's meant to kill living things, but for some reason, vampires are the exception. Maybe it's because they have to feed on blood, so it stands to reason consuming other things might make them sick, but it seems so strange that a creature with very specific weaknesses can be taken out with a poison dart. Another strange one is Otyughs. Their entire shtick is that they can eat just about anything, including literal garbage. You're telling me that thing can be poisoned? Maybe if they had Taco Bell in the Forgotten Realms, I'd get that, but come on, this is ridiculous. One of the least shocking things about D&D players is that pretty much every single one would want their character to become a werewolf if given the chance. It seems like such an obvious power fantasy that you would think there would be some really good official rules for what happens when a player gets lycanthropy. But while the old Monster Manual did have some guidelines for it, they weren't very fleshed out and even include the fact that the DM can just take over your character if you embrace being cursed. I always felt there was room for improvement. So did the new version really dig in and update those rules for the curse? Nope, they just gave up. The optional rules aren't even in there anymore. Now, when a player gets cursed, if they drop to 0 HP, they rise again as whatever were creature took them down, under the DM's control, with 10 hit points. Do they stay as a werewolf forever? Can they transform in the future? Do they have to go fight sparkly vampires now? I wish I could tell you, I really do, but I have no idea. One of the things I really like about this new book is that so many creatures have stronger or weaker versions that you can use to vary up encounters or challenge players at different levels. An example of this is the warrior. It comes in 3 flavors: infantry, veterans, and commanders. Just like good soldiers holding the line, the infantry get pack tactics, giving them advantage on attacks when an ally is next to their target. That's very cool and thematic. But why don't the veteran and commander have this too? As they get better at fighting, they get worse at teamwork. I can kind of understand for balance reasons why you might not want the CR10 commander to have an easy way of getting advantage, but veterans are only CR3. Winter Wolves have the same challenge rating and they get pack tactics, so what gives? I can only assume that years of trauma and battlefield loss have made them more cold and distant, less likely to rely on their allies and to instead go it alone. Like rogue players. One of the other changes that I generally like was simplifying a lot of monster stat blocks. The wording of some abilities is made clearer, more enemies were given bonus actions that take the place of clunkier mechanics they had before, the amount of spells you have to know for casters is pared back. All of that is good, though I do think some things were lost in translation a bit as they tried to make it as easy to run as possible. That's really apparent with the Spectator, a mini beholder that, instead of having an anti-magic eye like their big brother, can reflect spells back at the party as a reaction. In the old version, when they saved against a spell or dodged your player's roll, they could cause it to instead target a different player, forcing them to either make the saving throw themselves or the caster to re-roll their attempt at a hit. I really like that. But in the newer version, the trigger remains the same, but now whoever the Spectator chooses just makes a dexterity save or takes 3d6 force damage, no matter what spell was cast. I get that it's slightly easier to run, but it loses so much of what makes the ability fun and frightening to deal with. Having to save against going blind or dodge an acid arrow that your own player cast is way cooler than just getting some force damage sent your way. This is one I really wish they had just left alone. When you think Terror of the Deep, you'd think of Krakens, and they're just as fearsome as ever. They can conjure lightning bolts, lash out with their tentacles, and even fling any large creatures that get caught in their grasp up to 60 feet away. Did you notice what I said there? Any large creature, not large or smaller. So the ogre they're grappling? Yeah, no problem. But a halfling? That's just not possible. Obviously, this was an oversight, and they've already fixed it to say large or smaller in virtual versions of the Monster Manual. But if you're like me and bought a physical copy, you're out of luck. That's what you get for supporting your local game store. And finally, the beasts. Real-world animals as enemies for D&D. I understand that the game designers at Wizards of the Coast aren't biologists, and their main goal is to make monsters that are fun to fight against. That's fair. But I watched way too much Animal Planet as a kid, so let me tell you how they're wrong. Let's start with challenge rating. Why are hyenas formidable hunters who can get up to nearly 200 pounds, a lower CR than a bloodhawk? I don't care how strong this little bird is, they're way underestimating hyenas. Elephants and hippos are both tied at CR4, which is also wild. Don't get me wrong, hippos are very dangerous, but elephants are on another level. They even kill hippos from time to time out in nature. That's how much of a mismatch this is. Give the pachyderm some respect and bump that one up, Wizards. Ocean animals aren't safe either. Seahorses can bubble dash as a bonus action, giving them a burst of speed. That's nice, except real-life seahorses are some of the worst swimmers out there. They've got tiny little fins, not great if you want to go fast, and part of the reason they can grab things with their tail is so they don't get washed away. They're not exactly zooming around down there. What about extinct animals? You already know I've got a bone to pick there too. Like fossils? Yeah, you got it. They classify pteranodons as dinosaurs, despite the fact that technically they were just big reptiles, not official dinos. Why? I don't know, look it up. They also list saber-toothed tigers at CR2, double that of our modern lions and tigers. But Smilodons, which are the ones we're usually talking about when you bring up saber-toothed cats, were about the same size as a lion, and smaller than tigers. I get they have really big teeth, but this is very offensive to our current cats. And last but not least, my biggest gripe, orcas. Killer whales are some of my favorite animals on the planet, and I also think they're one of the scariest. They are intelligent, powerful hunters who work as a team to take down prey, including other whales. So obviously, these very social pack hunters would get pack tactics, right? Of course not. Wolves get it, sharks get it, lions get it, hell, even kobolds get it, but not the group of whales that literally have killer in their name? Absurd. Now, I'm not saying Wizards needs to hire me as a consultant on the next Monster Manual to make sure these stat blocks are accurate, but I'm not saying that either. I hope you enjoyed that entirely necessary and not at all pedantic look at the newest Monster Manual. I'd love to hear what changes and choices you were a fan of and what you could have done without in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leaving a like is always appreciated. And if you want to see more, you should subscribe to the Bard's College. I make videos all about D&D, DMing, and everything in between, so stick around. But for now, good luck, and remember, crit your players.